So, what did you do for the holiday weekend?
This weekend, what did I do? No, I was just hanging out with the family, pretty much.
Oh,
Not
that's nice.
much.
Well, that's pretty much what we did. We drove north. We have family in Utah and Salt Lake counties up in that area. And that was kind of fun going up really, really, really butt crack of dawn early on Saturday and getting home really late Sunday night. But we missed all the nasty traffic. So it was perfect.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, sometimes spending time with your family is exactly what you need to unwind and chill out from everything.
Uh-huh.
Well, today, the module we're going to be talking about this week and working on this week is creativity. And I don't know if you're like a lot of people, we grew up with this kind of understanding that creativity was something that was ingrained in you. You either had it or you didn't, and that was it. You know, some people had the disposition to be artists and creative people. Other people couldn't write creatively or do anything creatively, however much they tried. Had you ever felt that kind of a message being given to you at any time?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I can be creative. I guess it depends on like in what aspect or what I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, and it's when the reality is absolutely anybody can learn creativity, and it's a process of non-lineal thinking that we may get headaches at the beginning, but anybody can be trained to think creatively. Uh, Raising my kids, I found that the easiest way to help them to be creative is just to bring in humor and goofiness. A lot of the times, humor and goofiness are the two things that they provide an opportunity for us to just kind of enjoy things, but they kind of open the door for creative options that we otherwise would never even consider. And sometimes that's all it needs, just a little bit of creativity and goofiness. There is an observation that a number of people have made that life seems to go anywhere it possibly can. It used to be believed several years ago that there were conditions life simply could not survive in, and there was a very narrow window of temperature. For example, there was a very narrow window of chemical or water content in an environment, and that anything outside of that, life just couldn't exist. And as human beings have been exploring more and more of the planet, they've discovered that life has occurred in places that just, even a few years before the discovery was considered completely impossible. For example, in the 70s, early 80s, there was a discovery of all the different kinds of bacteria that thrived in the Yellowstone hot pots, those geysers. With this is superheated water. It's hotter than boiling in many places, and bacteria were able to survive there. I remember about 10, 15 years ago, I want to say, there were tube worms that were found. And a tube worm is a marine animal. Well, they don't know if it's an animal or a plant because sits in between. But a tube worm is one of those weird things. It looks kind of like an underwater palm tree where it has a long straw type shape and then it has little feathers that come out the top. And the feathers that come out the top help to uh, collect food from the water going by. And then its root system helps to collect nutrients from the sludge at the base of underneath the water. And some of these deep sea submersibles, the companies that owned them were setting records on how deep they could dive in the ocean. And they found that at the bottom of one of these really deep trenches, there's no sunlight had ever hit this area. It looked like a desert, but around some of these heat vents at the bottom of the ocean, there were tube worms that were growing, and instead of being a carbon-based life form like the rest of life as we know it on the planet, these tube worms had adapted to the environment and were silicon-based, which was considered up until that point completely impossible for life to continue. And the reason I say all this is because what is absolutely fascinating to me is human beings, we, for the most part, have a tendency to want to build or create or make something. Sometimes it's just to move. Sometimes it's to make something different that we haven't seen before. Sometimes it's just to renovate our house or to clean the room. But somehow there is a need that humans express to make things. And this is considered an inherent drive to generate or create. You know, we want to build, we want to continue. And it seems to be a cognitive expression of that drive that life has had, you know, after millions and millions of years of evolution to fill up whatever niche they can. You know, life always wants to continue and grow. And it seems like creativity from human beings is just an outgrowth of that. Hi, Christy. All right, Christy single-handedly doubled our audience size. Christy, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think I could hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Your microphone is picking up just a little bit of. Okay, now the wind is gone. But yeah, hi, good to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Sorry I chimed in a little late.
Oh, that is no problem at all. What we're talking about is just this week's module is all about creativity, and one of the things there's basically two types of creative thinking: divergent and convergent thinking. What's different about creative thinking than other kinds of thinking is when we engage in like lineal direct thinking, everything we come up with can be considered a direct result of whatever the thoughts or activities were that immediately preceded it. With creativity, we're bringing something new to the environment somehow through our imagination, through memory, even through conversations with other people that helps us generate new ideas. And the application of imagination to lineal thinking helps to generate ideas or build ideas that don't seem to make sense from a strictly lineal point of view. And there are some people in our lives that we can identify as very creative thinkers. There are other people that we may not necessarily identify as creative thinkers. But whenever we come up with something that either hasn't been tried before or may not have been tried in that particular situation, then we're engaging with something in a creative way. Now, there are two different kinds of creative thinking that we talk about in this module. One is divergent and one is convergent. Divergent means it's outside of the norm or out of the expected path. And convergent is thinking that generates solutions that do seem to fit within the path of the problem, within the lineal direction of whatever is going on. Some examples of this divergent thinking. There have been a number of cognitive experiments with primates other than humans, and the results are continually surprising to people. For example, larger primates like gorillas and chimpanzees can be, or the apes can be taught sign language, and they can use sign language to communicate. And then they can also spontaneously generate new forms of sign, generate new words that they will continue to use. So it's not just a one-off kind of thing. That's an example of divergent thinking. Another example of divergent thinking is when we're putting things away. I don't know, you probably all have somebody in your family, when you bring home groceries to put in the refrigerator or something, it just doesn't look like anything can fit. When somebody comes up and starts Tetrising things in, do you guys have somebody like this in your family? And they somehow get, those 4 bags of groceries you brought home to all fit in the refrigerator, and the refrigerator door can even close. It's something like, or packing the car for a trip. Those are all examples of divergent thinking, where it's generally not expected. In convergent thinking, we're talking about applying well-established resolutions for problems. Sometimes situations aren't exactly like other situations, but convergent thinking will adapt, for example, something that's parallel or similar to be a solution for whatever the problem is. Sometimes this also happens when you're talking to a friend and you can't remember a particular word or a particular lyric to a song, and then all of a sudden it comes to you. What's going on is that your brain has been trying to find what that expected resolution is while you were doing other things, and that generates the convergent thinking that's essentially creative in this case. So 2 different ways of approaching issues. But as I was mentioning to Nakoa, this is something that is not locked in when you're born. You can learn these kinds of things. In fact, there's been a number of studies that have shown that people who have older brains, for example, that may seem to be degenerating, the neurons can actually repair themselves or find alternate connections when the person is trained in particularly divergent creative thinking. And so, you expect somebody who has lived for an awful long time, they're very set in their ways, their neurons are pretty much set to where they're going to be, but still the person can learn new ways of doing things and generate new creative ways of thinking. Have you ever taken part in a brainstorming session? Have you guys ever done like brainstorming, things like that?
Yes.
Can you share just a little bit of what goes on in a brainstorming session?
Well, I think all of us at least done brainstorming, at least in some ways. Could be in different aspects, but I think one of the most popular is probably like for an essay. We're just brainstorming, or for a project, we're just pretty much throwing out as much ideas as we can think of to put together, and we'll end up with our final project or whatever.
All right, excellent. Now, when you've done something like that, when you've brainstormed ideas for an essay, in general, where do the best ideas come from? Are they at the beginning of the brainstorming session or at the end of the brainstorming session?
I'll say at the end.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of the times that's what seems to happen. And one of the things that can hurt creative thinking is by not doing that, by giving up, having an idea, if it doesn't work, and just decide, well, that's too bad. I'll wait and see what somebody else is doing. When you are brainstorming, when you're thinking of ideas, what I think what happens a lot of the times when we limit our creativity, it's when we make a decision somehow that whatever idea we come up with is not good enough. And then we begin to limit ourselves. And this is something that most of us do automatically, and it's really hard to get over it. But when you start doing the brainstorming, like you're talking about, Nicola, what begins to happen is that your brain is saying to itself, well, I didn't want to come up with a new idea because I thought it would be dumb, but there's really no pressure. So maybe I can come up with another idea. Maybe I can come up with another idea. And so you're essentially giving yourself permission to make potential mistakes. And by doing that, it frees up your mind to cast off a lot of the self-editing issues that we do that limits us, and helps us to generate ideas, many of which are really, really stupid. But because we've given ourselves permission to think along those lines, we come up with some ideas that are really excellent. So that brainstorming is a really good way to improve divergent thinking and come up with creative solutions to issues, not necessarily problems, but to issues. Now I'm going to see if I can. I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I don't know if the link to the video is working. Let's see if we can get it to work. I can hear it because it's super loud, but you guys can't hear anything, can you?
No, I can't hear anything.
Okay, give me just a second here. Sorry, I'm trying to get past a really awful ad. Okay, here we go. Is that what's? Nope, that's not it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to share this here. Let's see if we can do that. Sigh. One of the things I've noticed is that there's a lot of really cool tools on Canvas, and sometimes the sharing features will work beautifully, and other times not so much. Okay, so are you guys seeing the video screen now?
Yes, I could see that now.
Okay, now I'm gonna play it. See, tell me if you hear the sound. Did you hear
we can
that?
hear it.
Okay, great. So we're gonna watch a little bit of this. We're not gonna watch the whole thing. I'm hoping you guys do that on your own, but we are gonna watch a little. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing that for just a bit now, and I want to get to an idea. What he's talking about is multitasking, but the multitasking that's a really bad idea is when you are trying to do two things at the exact same time. And like texting and driving obviously is a really bad idea. One of the reasons why it's such obviously a bad idea is that your brain can't do two things at the same time. Have you noticed this? When you try to do two things at the same time, what's actually happening is that your brain is focusing on one thing, and then you try to switch, and the brain tries to catch up with your intent, focus on the new thing, and then if you go back, the same kind of thing happens. Your brain lags and tries to catch up with you again. So rather than doing multiple things at once, you end up not being able to really fully concentrate on either thing because your brain is trying to catch up, reassess the situation, find out what it needs to do, and then as soon as it's got that under control, switch back to focusing on the other thing you're interested in. Have you guys ever noticed that? Are you one of the very rare people that actually can do two things at the exact same time?
I am one of the people who can't do two things at the same time. I have a million and one tabs open on my laptop at all times, so I'm always jumping back and forth between tasks and assignments, and ultimately the progress is pretty low. The productivity is pretty low because I'm not getting things done, but I'm always jumping from task to task, so I'm pretty good at that in a bad way.
Well, I think that's true for almost all of us. Yes, Nicola.
Yeah, I'd pretty much say the same thing. I think I try to, but I'm not the greatest. I remember like just earlier while I was watching this video, I checked my phone for a second, got distracted, and I was like, wait, I gotta go replay this video again, go back a couple minutes, cause yeah, I just lost myself and then had to like redo it again.
Well, and that's thank you. That's something that is really, really common. I'm a stained glass artist. The studio that I work at, we have lots of different projects going on, lots of different times, and I do like bouncing from one project to another. But when I'm focused on a project, I stay with it because I found that if I have to go up front, for example, and answer a question of a customer that just came into the store, it takes me on average about 45 minutes to get back into the frame of mind and the swing of what I was doing, the rhythm of what I was doing, so that I can fully engage with the project I was working on again. And that's, I mean, 45 minutes is an awful long time. It usually, if I'm going from tab to tab or watching video or on my computer, it's usually just takes a couple minutes, but that's a couple minutes for my brain to kind of catch up with the intent of what I'm doing. So I think that's a very valid observation. Now, one of the things that this uh, module also talks about is it asks the question, are smartphones hurting your creativity? What do you think the answer would be to that? Do you think that something like a smartphone, these tech devices, would they hurt your creativity? Do they have the potential to hurt that?
I'd say it's a yes and no answer because depends on how you're utilizing it. If you use it in a form of creativity, if you're looking for inspiration, it can help it and be beneficial. If you're using it as a distraction and not letting it help you move towards your goal, then it can be a distraction. So depends on what your purpose is with it.
Yeah, and that is an excellent answer because I think that's exactly right. Because I use my devices to do research all the time. I get ideas for patterns and designs and painting and things like that. I use it for a lot of research. I use it for finding things at Walmart. If I get fed up with struggling through the confusion of where they've placed the towels in the store this time or whatever. But one of the things that I've noticed too is, um, do you guys have any idea of the attention span of a goldfish? And I'm just looking for an approximate thing. I don't remember the exact numbers, and I could probably find it if anybody was really interested. But do you know about what the average attention span of a goldfish is?
No, I'm not sure.
Google says 9 seconds.
9 seconds. Do you know what the average attention span of a college student is?
I do not. Probably short.
It's I read something about 3 years ago, and it may be different now, but it said the average attention of a college student was about 4.2 seconds. I thought that kind of sucks, but we do have really short attention spans, and when we have access to electronic equipment, for example, where we don't have to focus for a sustained period of time in order to get the answers that we're looking for or to get the distraction that we're hoping for, we train ourselves away from any sort of sustained concentration. And so I think that, Christy, you're exactly right. If we use it as a tool and we're cognitive of it being a tool, it can be a benefit. If when we use it as an distraction, then very definitely not so much. It's not helping very much. And I think that observation, it's anecdotal, but I think that holds up quite a bit. Oh, with this class, with this module, what we're going to be doing is a couple different activities. And one of them is just a short reflection that you'll write just about creativity. And so after you watch that full video from that person who's talking about um, multitasking, then and after you go through the quiz that talks about it, then you'll write your reflection on creativity. Now, what he is talking about in that video, if you haven't seen it yet, what he talks about, his version of multitasking, he calls slow motion multitasking. Have either of you ever heard that phrase?
I haven't.
Well, when we're talking about rapid fire multitasking, that's when, going between texting and driving and stuff like that, it's a really bad idea because it does take time to shift our focus into whatever the activity is that we're shifting to. But slow motion multitasking is a function of higher brain activity. And this is something that you guys are very well versed in already. You're students at a university, you're taking several different classes, and the classes that you're taking are on a wide range of different subjects. When you go from one class to another during the day, when you shift from homework in one field to another field, what you are doing is essentially slow motion multitasking. You're not lying it to yourself at any point saying, "Oh yeah, I can study more than one thing." What you are consciously switching from one track to another, and what that allows your subconscious to do is continue to explore all those fields that you're not currently engaged in consciously. What is really interesting to me is that when you start doing that, you're training your brain to accept as normal that there's going to be lots of different solutions to lots of different ideas. And you're training your brain that all these things that are so different, you're not evaluating them as though, one is worth more than another, or one is not as interesting as another necessarily. What you're doing is training your brain to acknowledge that all of these are important, and somehow, because they're all important to the same person, there are relations and there are connections that can be made. What this in turn does is gives your brain the incentive perhaps, or the permission to start exploring those connections. And after a while, I hope you guys have already had this experience so we can talk about it a little bit. After a while, as you are engaging in slow motion multitasking, you find yourself using potential solutions from one subject or activity set to resolve the issues that you're having with another activity set. An example from my background is I was taking computer language classes, programming classes, as well as professional writing classes. And I found that, and it was really weird, but I found that my professional writing training, how to concentrate on a theme, set out the resolutions or goals for the writing, and then create an outline and follow through and flesh out the outline. That was exactly what I needed to do to become better at computer programming. Figure out what the problem set was that needed to be resolved, how it was supposed to be resolved, and then diagram out how I was going to create the program. And what I found for the program, being able to think through the language requirements for the programming language, and being very aware of how things fit together and responded to each other and reacted with each other, that in turn really helped me to clarify my thinking in the writing course I was taking. And this is an excellent classic example of divergent thinking through slow motion multitasking. What kinds of experiences have you guys had with that, where you've been taking classes in totally different subjects that ended up somehow helping you to resolve situations or understand other subjects?
I think I have found my English class has been pretty useful for some of the other classes I've been taking. It's with Dr. Hotez, and I took an English 1010 with her, and now I'm taking English 2010, and she's kind of brought to our attention the idea of kind of comprehensive awareness and being a active listener, active reader, kind of being I guess more aware in our actions and things like that. So it's been helpful in having a little more of a aware mindset for an art class or anthropology and things like that, and being a little more organized for a math class. So it's a little more in depth. So English has been helpful. This art class has been helpful with viewing other courses in a more artistic way to make it a little more engaging, a little more exciting. So those are the two ways I find it beneficial.
Excellent, very good. That's a great example. Nicole, have you found any examples in your own work of this kind of a thing?
I would say it's actually been a while since I've been in school, but like just in these first weeks, I would say definitely like art. Definitely art, like all the what we've been talking about, like the flow state, being creativity, like all that's kind of helped me with my other classes, how I can balance, I can find that flow state in my other classes to be able to accomplish things, get stuff done, and it kind of like connects in different ways.
All right, excellent. So you can see that it connects, and it's really fascinating when we can examine what those connections are and identify them, like both of you are doing. And you can see that slow motion multitasking is really expanding just the network of possible solutions you have to situations you may encounter. My oldest brother is a mathematician and musician, and he also volunteers at a prison, which those things you would think don't have anything whatsoever to do with each other. But he has found that just opening himself up to volunteering in such a situation has helped him to take risks in music and mathematics that he would never have considered beforehand. And conversely, the music helps him to be more creative in his math resolutions, and the math helps him to find ways to connect and be of practical help in the volunteer work that he does. So everything can be, if we allow it to, be connected. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. But what is really interesting to me is that looking at it, giving it a vocabulary as to what, giving a vocabulary to what we're observing about our slow motion multitasking, it's amazing to me because when we become aware of this, we can see how that cross-pollination between activities that we do can really expand our awareness and creativity much more. It becomes much more than just the sum of the parts. I'll say that. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Now, there's a collaborative activity or collaborative creativity activity that we do for this. And this one, what I would like you to do on this activity is involve somebody that you can communicate with. And I actually tried doing this. There's a couple apps that you can get on your phone where you can create an avatar for an AI friend. Have you guys seen this at all?
Yeah, I've seen that on just social media platforms where you create like a chat AI robot to conversate with.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's it would be really interesting to see how that would help with this. But a lot of those programs are they had their origin in actually a therapy program that was written way back in the 1980s to help people evaluate answers that they were giving to questions about how they felt about things. Where the AI program was specifically designed to rephrase what the person was expressing, and it just gave them a new avenue of communication because it felt like somebody was actually listening to them. And so what we see in the AI today is kind of the multiple generation uh, descendant of that original therapy program, which I think is absolutely great. But if anybody's interested in using that for this activity, that would be great. But I'll just walk through. There's essentially 6 steps of this activity, and I want you to walk through it. And it's your result, whether or not it's successful, is less important than the fact that you're really trying and that you're doing everything step by step through the activity. So consider that. I say that because what I found is that in every single case, when people went through this activity, what they came up with was really something. And it was very interesting to see that kind of result. What you will do in this activity is kind of assess a little bit about what kinds of things you have, what items you have already in your possession or that you have access to in, for example, your apartment or your home. And you'll think about that. It'll just kind of have a loose idea, inventory of what you have available. And then the first step of this activity is you'll start just by making a list of possible things you can create with those materials. And this is just an opportunity to brainstorm. And there's no good or bad. Well, the bad is that you don't do it. But what I want you to do is start listing things, and it's the first 6 or 7 are going to be really dumb. I can pretty much guarantee you. But after that, just start throwing ideas out there just to see what kinds of ideas you can come up with, regardless of whether or not you think you can complete it in the time allotted or whether or not you think it's engineering, it's possible through contemporary engineering or principles of physics. I just want you to come up with as many ideas as you can. And in this, what you'll need to do is write down the list of things that you come and write down the list of things you generate through your brainstorming. And if you want to use one of the free brainstorm software apps you can find, that's fine. Just take a screenshot after you're done doing that. So that's the first thing, just coming up with a bunch of ideas, looking at the stuff you have in your home. And with the idea of mixing the materials, pretty much. Then the next step is analyze your ideas. Go through, and if there are things that are the same, that are just in different words, cross out the thing that repeat. The things this is when you start thinking, well, that one is just too absurd. That one, there's no physical way that would work. That's when you cross that out. And the whole time you're doing this, you're also thinking in the back of your head, what would be actually interesting that I could build and that I could build in a conceivable time frame, within a few hours, for example, with the materials that I have available. So at first you're generating a bunch of ideas, impossible, stupid, impractical, doesn't matter. You're coming up with a bunch of ideas, take a picture of that list, and then you go through that and then see if they're or go through, knock out the things that are completely impractical or impossible, and narrow the list down to something that you think you could actually make. And then at this point, you can engage your AI friend on social media, or you can engage a roommate or a living, breathing friend, a family member, somebody else, and have them just kind of explain what you're doing and have them wade in a little bit and just give you some ideas as well. Do they concur with you? Do they agree that this idea could be practical? Do they think that this other idea might be more interesting to try? You might enjoy it more. And then use that to kind of hone in on what you want to do. So this time you're engaging somebody outside of yourself to help you analyze your ideas and come up with a final idea. And you may not want to follow their advice at all, and that's fine too. The important thing is to engage them. Then the next step number 3 is start thinking of this thing that you want to make as a product or a machine or something that does something. Is there a problem that it could solve? Is it something that you could actually make? Would it ever have a practical purpose? So we're engaging these ideas we've generated from the perspective of, is this something that we can use as a machine to accomplish something? And then that's how we're going to shift our direction, making this set of ideas from materials that we already have in the house, narrowing it down to one thing, and then gearing that one thing towards a machine that could solve a problem. And then step number 4 is give yourself plenty of time and build this from the stuff that you have on hand. This is another good time to involve somebody. It's going to be a lot easier to involve somebody who's real flesh and blood, because what you'll need them to do is look at this thing and help you decide whether or not what you're doing is going to be successful. They may give you ideas of how to use the tape better to connect this or whatever. Or they may ask you questions about, well, this thing right here that's supposed to bend, it's not bending right. What can we do to fix that? And then your next step, your 5th step, is follow through with the building, incorporate their input, incorporate the flaws that you found as you were trying to realize this, and put this together as something that can actually work. Whether or not it does work, try to get it as far as you can so that it's constructed to be sturdy, and it's constructed so that at least it looks like it would work if you had that one missing piece or whatever. But the entire idea of this is to go through a process where you just start with a bunch of random things and then actually create a functional machine that could actually solve an issue or a problem. Then, and that's essentially the last step, and document it. I would recommend as well, you're required to have photos of 2 different angles of this thing. I would recommend, it might be a good idea to, if you start building it and then somebody comes in and tells you, well, you need to change this and this, it might be a good idea to take a photo before the change and after the change, or even a photo of all your items set out. Now, you don't have to use all the items in your house that you found. You don't even have to use most of them. That's what you're weeding out and deciding on during the whole part of the process where you analyze your list and decide what might be most practical to build. And then, and it might be good to take photos along the way, because maybe you're going to change directions when you're halfway through and you need some reference. When you're all done with this, your submission is going to include a photo of your brainstorming list, or a screenshot if you use the brainstorming program. You're going to write, type out something that, a description of what you hope to build, hope to achieve from this, what your analysis led you to. You're going to include photos from 2 different angles, like I made of the final product, like I mentioned, of the final product. And then the last thing you're going to include in your submission, and it might be good to put the photos and everything into a Word document and submit it as one document. Finally, you're going to summarize everything with a 4-sentence paragraph. The first sentence, you're going to describe what this is. Second sentence, you're going to describe how you put it together. Third sentence, you're going to describe the purpose it serves, or what it represents, or what it means. And the fourth and last sentence, you're going to describe whether or not you feel it was successful. Now, do you remember the tools of artistic critique that we talked about last week and the week before? Do you guys remember those tools?
I do not have it off the top of my head.
Okay, I'll just I'll do a really quick recap. But there's 4 tools. The first one is describe. The second one is analyze. The third is interpret, and the fourth is evaluate. So when you describe, you're talking about the physical properties of whatever it is. The second tool, analyze, you're going to be talking about how it's put together, how it was made, how it was processed. The third, interpretation, is what it could mean. And the fourth, evaluate, is whether or not it's successful. So in that fourth sentence, describe how you feel if it was successful, is a really good application of that fourth tool of those tools of artistic critique. And so this is an example to apply those in your short write-up. And then right underneath, towards the bottom of the description of this activity, I have kind of a layout of what the submission would look like, kind of an overview. Now, as you read through this, email me any questions. Whoever's watching this video, as you read through the instructions, email me whatever questions you might have after you ask somebody else to look at the instructions and see if it makes sense to them. And if it doesn't, if you can't get any resolution from them, then email me and I will answer your question to the best of my ability. And if more than one person asks the same question, then I'll send out an email to everybody and make a change in the description of this. I think this is an assignment that many people find a little bit difficult, because what you are doing for this assignment is not creating a finished art product necessarily. The most important aspects of this assignment are going through the steps of the activity. Now, I do expect people to make the thing that they make so that it does hold up at least long enough to take a photo of, and it needs to look like it's stable. But it doesn't have to be absolutely gorgeous. It just does need to represent the reasoning and thought that you've put into it. Do you have any questions about that at all?
Has this assignment already been created on Canvas?
Yes, let me show you. All right. Here's the assignment. It's called Collaborative Creativity. And then it goes through, the instructions go through step by step what it is that you're doing. So when you go to this activity, and it's in Module 3, first thing you do, read through this paragraph and see if you can get a sense of what's going on. And then, before you do anything, read through all the 6 steps of the project. After you read through all 6 steps, think about it for a little bit, maybe 15, 20 minutes at least, and then go ahead and start over and then actually start doing the process. So it is all written out, and there have been some really wild things that people have turned in. one person turned in something that was a maquette or scale model for a teapot and cup contraption where you could actually pour out of the teapot into the cup without having to touch the cup. And it had swing arms and different things like that, but it was kind of fun. The biggest restrictions for this is, first, you need to involve somebody else at least two stages of the process. And the second thing that's really important is you don't buy anything new. You're just using the material that you have already where you live. And that, if you have a lot of stuff, if you're a hoarder like I am, there's going to give you a lot of opportunities. If you're not, if you're a clean freak, it may be a little bit more difficult. Does that help, Christy?
Yes, that helps. So to reiterate, you said it's under module 3, and I'm just having a hard time finding it.
Okay, if you go to the modules, go to module 3. And then you'll look down about almost at the bottom. If you look at my screen, you can see where it's placed in module 3. Under written reflection, it's Studio: Divergent Thinking.
Okay, I found it. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Now there's another activity that I've had people get a little freaked out by this because they think there's a lot of stuff to do, but it's actually not going to take that long if you choose to read and follow the directions as opposed to getting freaked out by them. So I'm gonna share my view really quick again. This activity I'm calling other artists who express their creativity. And this is the last activity for that module number 3. In line with the subconscious comparisons that we make as we do that slow motion multitasking process, I also want people to be aware of several different artists. And this is not going to be a difficult activity to do, but towards the end of the term, everybody is going to be doing a short research project as part of this course. And this is kind of an introduction to what you'll be doing in that research project. For that research project, you're going to pick one artist. You're going to find out a little bit about that artist, and you're going to make a very short PowerPoint presentation that you'll record with your own voice narrating on that artist. And to get to there, I have several different steps that are cataloged in the different modules as we continue through the term. So if you do each of the steps in the modules as we go through the term, at the end of the term, you'll have your research project all done. So that's what I'm saying. I've divided it up so that you don't feel overwhelmed. And even though there's this long list of people right here, you are not responsible for finding out about all of them. What this element of the research is going to be is you're essentially going to be looking up only 20 of those 85 artists. You're going to be spending on average about 3 minutes on the internet for each one or less. I think most people can do this in about 45 seconds on each one. You are going to find artists that are interesting to you, pick a couple of them, look up something that they've done on the internet, and record that you've looked it up. And that's essentially what you're doing. So for these actual steps, the first step is you're going to think about who you are as a person, and you're going to list 10 different self-identifiers. And you don't even have to write this down. This is something just for you to consider who you are as an individual. Say, for example, if I'm doing it, I'm my height is kind of a middle height. I was raised in the U.S. My background is Christian. I think it's a horrible idea for anybody to go skydiving ever. I really like art that feels authentically generated, and I really love like old stuff, like cave paintings and rock art and things like that. So those are a couple self identifiers. And whatever your identifiers are, you are never going to write them down for this class to share with me. I'm never going to see that list. That list is entirely for you. Now, so that's the first thing you do. And then for the rest of the assignment, what you're going to do is go through each of these sections and follow the directions to write down the name of an artist, a piece of art that they've done, and then a couple words to talk about it. And you'll see here on number 3, it says find one work of art that pops up in that search with the name of artist plus art, and then write the following: the artist's name, the title of work, and a very short description. And the description could be 5 words long or less. Then move on to the next artist and repeat that for all the artists that you need to do. And look at number 5. You're doing 20 different artists, and that's it. But out of those 20 different artists, when you're done with this whole list, you're going to pick one who you feel is different than you. So remember, you made those 10 self-identifiers up here on number 1. You're going to find one artist out of that list that is different than you, whose work you like. And then you're going to submit that artist's name as a person you'll be doing research on throughout the rest of the term. Again, it's not an awful lot of research, but you're going to pick one artist that you're going to try to learn more about. And then you're going to submit, not the 10 identifiers, you're not going to ever submit that. You're going to submit the list of 20 artists and their works, and then at the end of the list of 20 artists, you're going to write, I chose so-and-so to do further research on throughout the rest of the term. And I chose them because I really like the 3 pieces that I saw online. They just seem to really resonate with me. Or I chose this artist because they're nothing like me and I think what they do is fascinating. Or I chose this artist because I think that they'd be really kind of cool to meet in real life. It can be any, I just need a rationale for your choice, and that's it. So, Christy, can you see this where it says it will look something like this?
Yes, I could see that.
Okay, so you're going to list and say the artist name, the title, if you know it, and most of the time you can find the title, and then you're going to write just a few words describing it very briefly. You see that? It's not very much. You have the artist name, you have the name of the work, and then you have just a brief description next to it. You're going to do that for 20 people. And then at the end of that list of the 20 artists that you picked, you'll say the artist I picked for future work is, give the name of that artist, and then explain why you think that what her stuff is interesting to you. And I will give some examples. We go this, here's group 1. There's 8 artists in this list, but I'm only going to pick 2 of these to work with. So I'll pick a name and I'll do a search for that name plus art, see what shows up, and then I can write, if I've just picked Sandy Skoglund, I'll say Sandy Skoglund, comma, Apocrypha of the Glowing Cats, comma, a bunch of green cats in a gray room, kind of thing. All right, and then Slinkachu, this will be number 2. The second artist in that group, will say Slinkachu, comma, The Last Resort, comma, little teeny tiny man and a teeny tiny palm tree on a tennis ball in the middle of a puddle. Okay, and then I'll go on. So the next 2 artists will be 2 from here, whichever two you want. The next two artists will be from this group of three, whichever two of these guys you want. The next, and you'll go through that list. So there's, I believe, 6 groups like that you'll pick 2 artists from each of those groups. And then for this list, there's about 40 artists in this list. You're just going to pick 8 and do the same thing. Does this make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. After you do all 20 artists, then the last thing you're going to put on that document is the artist I picked for future work is the name of the artist, and then you're going to write why you want to pick them. And that's it. So you have 20 artists and their works, and then the very last one is the artist that you picked and why you picked them. All right, does that seem reasonable?
I think so. That sounds doable.
Okay, excellent. All right, now that's pretty much the whole thing for this module. That is all that I needed to cover. And this can be a little bit confusing, this whole module, because we're dealing with how people think, which is not as straightforward as following directions like take this simple shape and draw it upside down. You know, that this module is a little bit less straightforward, but it will make a lot of sense, and you'll be grateful you did it as we go on with the class. Now, do you have any questions, Christy? Or if you don't, can you think of any questions other students might have for the things that we talked about?
I don't think I have any questions so far. I think you covered it all pretty well. If I do, I'll definitely send you a Canvas message once I look into these assignments a little more in detail. But for now, I don't think so. That last assignment that we just spoke about, did that also have a due date of Sunday?
Yes, and this is something that a couple people have been really concerned because they have jobs and things like that. Everybody has stuff going on all the time. We do have a couple days grace period. So if something comes up and you absolutely can't get it done, most of the time these due dates are there so that you can make sure you don't have everything due all at the same time. I don't want anybody overloaded. And so this is designed to just kind of help you along the semester and get things done in order so that, again, you don't have every assignment on your lap all at the same time.
Okay, that sounds good. Other than that, no, I don't have any questions, and I will definitely send you a Canvas message if I do.
Okay, and if I get multiple examples of the same question, then I will make sure and either email everybody or make the change in the directions that I've given, or most likely do both. Now, I will tell you, for that artist list, there are 85 artists on that list. You only need to do that quick search for 20 of them. And people have done that in as little as, actually, I had somebody do it in 19 minutes. But I think that's extraordinary. Half an hour is probably a little bit more realistic. When I required people to do, and I did about a year and a half ago until I came to my senses, I did require people to go through and do that with all 85 people. And one lady was a mom of several teenagers, and one of her kids were irritating her. So she had one of her kids just do it, and he set the record. He was able to do all 85 names, find artwork, write it down next to the artist's name and a short description. He was able to do all that in 45 minutes. And I just, wow, that's pretty amazing. So you guys are only responsible for 20 of those. But all right, if you don't have any questions, you can't think of anything else, that's great. And that will do it for today. And just like Christy said, if anybody has any questions whatsoever, please make sure that you contact me as soon as you can, and I will do my best to answer them and send the answer out to everybody. All right? Okay? Anything else, Christy, that you can think of?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
All right, great. I hope you guys have an absolutely wonderful and amazing weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all next week, next Tuesday afternoon. Thank you.